It's Saturday, September 8th, 2018. I'm Justin Castelli. This is All About Your Benjamins and your weekly mixtape and weekend review. It was a shortened holiday week, but there was a lot of headlines out there to cover. So I'm going to try my best to keep my summary succinct so we can get through a number of these headlines. So let's take a look at the headlines this week that are impacting your financial planning, investments, and more. And we're going to start with some economic data. The employment numbers came out for last month, and the U.S. market added 200,000 new jobs. Wages grew at 2.9% over the last year, so employment continues to look strong, and that's a good thing for the economy. And remember, we talked about this in the Fed and what they're watching. I did see a tweet this week from Barry Ritholtz that kind of opened my eyes and spoke to me. He basically tweeted something to the extent, who cares about the employment numbers month to month when they continue to show a strong trend? Let me know when things change. So I don't spend too much time on the numbers, but I think I'm going to take Barry's advice and still touch on them every month when they come out, but not spend a lot of time like I have in the past. Really only highlight them if we see a change in the trend and what that might mean. But to end this last longer conversation about the employment numbers, employment continues to look strong in the U.S. and wages are going up, which is a good thing to see. Next, we're going to move to Supreme Court Brett Kavanaugh's testimony or hearing this week in front of the Senate. It was a few days of grueling testimony. I didn't watch any of it. I caught some of the headlines. I caught some social media shares that were out there. It's obviously a very important decision. It's a lifetime appointment, so it's something that could change the way that our future looks. But it's tough to kind of really understand where things lie because there's so much spin in the media, and you have to take those social media posts and summaries that you might read or look at with a grain of salt. So as important of a decision it is, it's also kind of a frustrating situation, a lot of drama behind the hearings, everything from cryptic hand signals to confidential documents being released, and protesters and more. So a very dramatic scene over the 3 days. Understandably so, a lot of emotions, a lot of polarizing views on what a new Supreme Court justice could mean and could do. But the sad thing is, I think it brings out a lot of the ugliness in politics and more. So we'll keep an eye on what this is, but that was a big thing this week for 3 days. It dominated CNBC, which I usually have in the background. It's just kind of some white noise for me. But it was all over the news, a lot of follow-up, a lot of debate, and obviously a lot of protesting as well. So we'll see where this continues to go. I have no idea if he did a good job or not. Unfortunately, it's kind of out of our hands. We can kind of only hope for the best decision to be made for us as a country. Speaking of bringing out ugliness in people, Nike announced earlier this week that Colin Kaepernick is going to be the face of their Just Do It campaign. I believe it's their 30th campaign. And this ignited responses from both sides of political parties and social parties and all over the place. A very polarizing decision by Nike. The most silly response was the burning of the Nike gear, shoes, cutting off the swoosh of the socks. I understand the point that people were making. I think the way that they were going about doing it was kind of silly. If you think about it, they already paid for those items. Nike's not hurting by that. If you're wanting to make a point, then maybe you quit supporting them going forward. I'm also curious to how many of these people who are protesting in that way realize the other brands like Converse and Hurley and Cole Haan that Nike owns, that they may still support Nike and not even know it. I tend not to get too political on here, mainly because I don't really identify with either political party wholly. And politics is usually a losing battle. You can't change people's minds. So I don't want to get too far into the politics of everything. But it was a big polarizing story. I'm a big Nike fan. I have been forever. And I personally like the campaign. I really like the commercial that came out in the NFL game. I want my boys to dream crazy. I tweeted that out later and shared the commercial. I think the message behind the campaign is lost in the politics of Colin Kaepernick and the protest and everything that's going on. And I think that's a shame because the message is good. It's a message that I think our youth needs to hear. And you've got grown-ups messing it all up because of political views and stubbornness and everything. And so again, it brings out the ugly in people. I've got friends on both sides of the argument. I will continue to have friends on both sides of the argument. I tend not to let these types of things make me disengage from people. Everybody's entitled to their own view. It saddens me that this, a divide like this is being driven, and at least magnified by the media. But it is what it is. In 6 months, this campaign will pass. Nobody will really be talking about it anymore, and this is just a blip on the radar. But I like what Nike did. I have no problem with Kaepernick being the face of the campaign and being the spokesperson for it. And I'll leave it at that. So hopefully it didn't get too political. Hopefully it didn't make anybody mad. That was not my intention. But part of all this is for you all to get to know me better as well and kind of my view on things. And this was a big thing this week, and I wanted to talk about it. So yeah, that's my take on Nike. And speaking of Nike, this is not the first time they've made a controversial campaign. Michael Jordan, I believe, was the first black male athlete that they made a brand for and a big campaign behind. You had the Charles Barkley, I'm not a role model. This is not something that Nike's afraid to do, and I applaud them for being able to take a stance. And if you are interested in learning more about Nike, the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight is a great read, and if you read that, you wouldn't be surprised by this campaign at all. So that's my tangent on the Nike situation. But it was a big story this week, so I thought I would address it a little bit. Let's get back to markets. There was a lot of market volatility this week, and not volatility in the big scary type, but if you read the headlines this week, you were on a roller coaster ride. Beginning of the week, we're at all-time highs. Everything looks good in the market. Positivity's in the headlines. Fast forward through the week, and tech gets slammed. Emerging markets have entered a bear market. If you're not familiar, a bear market is an arbitrary 20% decline from the recent highs. So emerging markets have hit that level to the negative side. That's a part of a diversified portfolio. It should not change your investment philosophy. I don't think so. Part of being diversified is always having a part of your portfolio that you wish you didn't own. So if you have that right now, you're doing things the right way. It's part of the investing game. You can't have risk, you can't have reward without taking on risk, and it's been proven that being diversified for most investors is the best approach. So we've got to take these blows while we have to in order to get the gains from emerging markets when things recover, which eventually I think they will. So market headlines all over the place this week. Facebook and Twitter were in front of Congress talking about the Russian meddling in the 2016 elections and what they're doing to prevent that, and in security. And that has been one of the reasons that some people have cited for tech's fall this week. But it could also be that they just had a great run this year. If you look at the NASDAQ, it was leading the way year to date, and maybe some profit taking was taken because this happened, and maybe tech picks it back up. No one's really going to know, and nobody does know. But markets were a little bit volatile this week, but still, year to date looking pretty good. Stay with Wall Street. Amazon joined the 4 Comma Club. Shout out to StockTwits for coining that term, or at least they were the first people I heard say that. So during the week, Amazon topped $2,050 and some change as the share price. Did not end the week there, but nonetheless it crossed that $1 trillion valuation, which is kind of a pretty cool thing. If you remember, Apple did that a little while ago. So Apple won the race, but Amazon was not too far behind. On the other side of the Amazon coin when it comes to stocks, Tesla continues to bleed red. This week, the saga continues with Elon Musk going on the Joe Rogan podcast, smoking a blunt, drinking some whiskey, I think it was whiskey, talking about how he's not a businessman but a business magnate, and playing with samurai swords. So overall, not a real good look for your CEO if you're a stockholder or if you're working for a company. But at the same time, I think it gets a little bit overblown because it is Elon Musk. You would think that he might lay low given everything going on. I'm not sure how PR from Tesla let him go do that, or even if they have the ability to control where he goes and what he says. But nonetheless, the stock market didn't like it. You have people like Jim Cramer saying that Musk should not be running the company. It'd be interesting to see if he stays at the helm and CEO of Tesla, or if the board steps in. I've been watching Succession, so that's why I think about this. The board might step in and relieve him of his duties as CEO and just let him go back to being the innovator and the creative person that he is. I mean, he said himself he's not a businessman, he's a business magnate, he's an engineer. Those are the things he likes to do. So nonetheless, it's an entertaining story. if you're a shareholder, not making recommendations, but you've got some decisions to make as far as your belief in this company and Elon Musk and where it might go and what Wall Street thinks about it. Because at the end of the day, that is a big determining factor of what happens to the stock price. So not a recommendation or hinting at anything, but if you're a shareholder, what are you doing? And then finally, our friends from Wells Fargo back in the news again. Just loving to get all this great press they do. This time they are in the news because the Justice Department is probing its wholesale banking unit over committing fraud by altering client information. So back in the news, not sure how they continue to maintain running a business, running a bank. I feel bad for the employees that are having to deal with this fallout for things they're not doing, or for having the pressure from Wells Fargo to have to do these types of things to hit numbers or whatever metrics would cause them to do this type of stuff. So not sure how they stay in. If you're looking at ESG investing, that social impact and corporate governance scores have to be real low for Wells Fargo. So we'll see what the next one is. I'm sure it won't be long before another headline comes up. All right, that's it. I talked longer than I thought I was going to. I told you I was going to try, but unsuccessfully. Another longer week in review video. Hope you enjoyed it. I apologize that it went over, but there's a lot to cover. So be sure to check all the mixtape articles below. If you're watching this on YouTube or Instagram TV, head on over to All About Your Benjamins to check those out. While you're there, be sure to subscribe to everything All About Your Benjamins, YouTube, podcast, blog. Get it all so you don't miss anything. So thanks for watching. Have a great weekend, and I will see you in the next video.